What if the grey matter inside your skull isn't actually you? What if that 1.5 kilograms of complex nerve tissue, which we are used to calling our brain, is actually a separate, almost sentient creature? A mysterious guest in our body? It sounds like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster or scientific heresy. But this shocking theory was once voiced not by a science fiction writer, but by a world-renowned scientist. An academic and neurophysiologist whose works are studied in the best universities on the planet. Natalia Petrovna Bekhtereva, the great heretic of science. She dedicated her entire life to studying the most mysterious object in the universe and dared to make a conclusion that still makes her colleagues' blood run cold. The brain is something more than just an organ. Throughout her long, brilliant career, she studied human consciousness literally under a microscope, implanting gold electrodes into the deepest structures of the brain. She saw how a thought is born, where an emotion flares up, which neuron is responsible for fear, and which for genius. And the deeper she plunged into this abyss, the more clearly she understood we are not the full masters inside our own heads. Bekhtereva was convinced that the brain lives its own separate life, sometimes protecting us, and sometimes leading us into a trap our self doesn't even suspect exists. It throws genius solutions at us in our sleep. It generates inexplicable premonitions. It places filters on reality, letting through only what it deems necessary. Who are we then? Merely temporary carriers of this powerful and ancient mechanism, beyond the edge of science. But this was only the beginning of her journey beyond the forbidden line. Where official science put a full stop and hung an unexplainable sign, for Natalia Bekhtereva, the most interesting part began. Her laboratory became a place where they seriously used the most advanced equipment to study phenomena that other scientists turned away from in disgust. Clairvoyance, prophetic dreams, the ability to read thoughts. For her, these were not fairy tales for housewives, but real manifestations of the brain's hidden capabilities. She was not afraid to invite people with paranormal abilities to the institute, recording with instruments what seemed impossible. She believed that genius and superpowers are links in the same chain, breakthroughs of consciousness beyond the flags of habitual reality. This very path led her to the most important, almost sacred question that has worried humanity for thousands of years. What lies beyond the final line? Is biological departure a complete and final end? And here, academician Bekhtereva, a person of strict scientific discipline, made the most daring statement. Based on her own tragic experience and many years of observations, she came to the conclusion that our consciousness, our personality, possibly does not vanish with the last beat of the heart. She did not deny that the body does not live without the soul, and she was convinced that biological tragedy does not necessarily lead to the complete disappearance of what we call the soul. It was not just an assumption, it was her firm position, suffered for and backed by facts she was not afraid to voice. She dared to suggest that our brain is an ideal receiver, capable of picking up information from the outside, from a certain general field where perhaps everything is preserved after physical decay. She was looking for scientific proof of eternity, the trap of intelligence. But the most striking thing is that her discovery concerned not distant worlds and mystical phenomena, but our everyday life, and how the best human qualities, intelligence and kindness, are actually slowly leading us to ruin. So, imagine two people. One is a brilliant intellectual, a genius who solves complex equations all night long, calculates risks, analyzes the past, and tries to predict the future. His brain is a red-hot processor that never knows peace. And the second is that same fairy tale character, Ivan the Fool, who thinks only about where to eat and sleep sweetly. Who would you call smart? The answer seems obvious, but Natalia Bekhtereva dared to declare, From the point of view of the organism's survival, it is Ivan the Fool who acts truly wisely. And this is not a metaphor, but harsh biochemistry. The academician believed that so-called stupid people do not actually exist. There are those who think, and those who do not wish to do so, and in this unwillingness lies their colossal advantage. While a smart person experiences incredible emotional and intellectual tension, their body works to the point of exhaustion. Every thought, every anxiety, every scenario of the future that we replay in our heads represents huge energy costs. The brain, making up only 2% of the body's mass, consumes up to 25% of the entire organism's energy. And when we launch an endless internal dialogue, we literally burn our life resource. Cortisol is released into the blood, the stress hormone, which, with constant activity, destroys brain cells, weakens immunity, and accelerates aging processes. Remember how many sleepless nights you spent replaying the same dialogue in your head? Did you not feel completely shattered after a day full of tense reflections, even if you did not physically move from your spot? This is the price we pay for our intellect. And what is Ivan the Fool doing at this time? He does not spend precious energy on what does not depend on him. He is not worried about world problems. He does not try to solve other people's puzzles. He is in a state of almost meditative peace, preserving his mental and physical energy. Bekhtereva claimed that a huge number of problems that make us suffer and lose strength are actually trifles. Many of them resolve themselves without our participation. And the solutions to some are generally beyond our capabilities. But a smart person cannot just stop thinking about it. He drives himself into a trap of endless analysis, destroying his nervous system. Ivan, without even realizing it, acts like a genius strategist. He saves his main capital, his life force. He does not deplete his psyche with stress and nervous tension, allowing his body to work in an optimal energy-saving mode. Of course, Natalia Petrovna did not call for abandoning thinking altogether. A person must think, analyze, and create. But she insisted, we must learn to consciously turn off this mental storm. Sometimes you need to allow yourself to be that very Ivan, who does not try to embrace the immense and solve all the problems of the world. In this, in her opinion, lies the highest form of self-care. The ability to let go of a situation, stop chewing mental gum, and simply trust the flow of life is not stupidity, but the greatest wisdom, the guarantee of a long and healthy life. Mastering the art of mental silence can protect you from the inside, building an indestructible fortress against stress. The curse of kindness. But Bekhtereva knew that there is a far more insidious enemy that strikes from the outside, using against us the brightest thing we have, our kindness. If the battle with one's own mind is an internal war, then the battle with other people's ingratitude is an external war, and in it, our main weapon, kindness, becomes our most vulnerable spot. Natalia Petrovna, as a neurophysiologist, looked at this eternal question not from the point of view of morality, but from the position of pure energy. Why do honest, responsive, kind people so often live worse than their selfish and unprincipled opposites? The answer, in her opinion, was simple and ruthless. Because good people are constantly used. The creative light of their soul, their readiness to help and share their last possession, is perceived not as a gift, but as a free, inexhaustible resource. And the more a good person agrees to this exploitation, the more ruthless consumers appear around them. Think about it. Does this sound familiar? You help again and again. You accommodate others. You give your time, strength, and emotions. You do this selflessly because, as we were taught from childhood, true kindness requires nothing in return. But at some moment, you turn around and realize a one-way street has formed in your life. You are a donor, and around you are recipients who take your energy for granted and do not even think about sharing theirs. According to Bekhtereva, at this moment, you are not just being used. You voluntarily become a free charging station for other people's selfish desires. And the more you give, the more is demanded of you. It is a bottomless pit that sucks your life force to the last drop, leaving behind only fatigue and apathy. But there is a situation even scarier and more destructive. This is our desperate attempt to help someone who did not ask for this help, and most importantly, internally does not need it. When a kind person sees someone else's hardships, they instinctively reach out a hand. It seems to us that our efforts, our advice, our support are capable of pulling another out of the pit of addiction, depression, or self-destruction. But Bekhtereva called this dangerous self-deception. No one can ever help a person if they have not made a firm decision to change themselves. All our efforts will crash against the wall of their indifference. It is the same as trying to forcefully drag someone to the top of a mountain who is comfortable living at its foot. You will spend a colossal amount of energy. You will exhaust yourself, but the person will remain at the bottom. It is in such situations, as Natalia Bekhtereva argued, that we commit the most terrible act of betrayal against ourselves. When we invest our soul, our time, our best impulses into someone who does not appreciate it and see no result, we do not just get tired. We feel devastated, humiliated, as if our kindness is something insignificant and unnecessary. This feeling burns from the inside, breeds cynicism and disbelief in people. A terrible paradox emerges. By trying to save our neighbor, we cause fatal harm to ourselves. Bekhtereva insisted, it is necessary to soberly and coldly evaluate what you are spending your most valuable and irreplaceable resource on, the energy of your life. The Origins of Steel, 1937. These cold, almost cruel truths about human nature were not derived by Natalia Bekhtereva in the quiet of an office. She paid a terrible price for this knowledge. To understand how to protect herself, she had to descend to the very bottom, into the frozen hell of 1937, where only those who mastered 3 iron laws survived. To understand where a refined woman academic drew this icy, ruthless knowledge about human nature, we must go back to that very year when a giant country went mad. 1937. It is not just a date from a history textbook. It is a brand burned into the fates of millions. At night, black vans crawled through the cities. The best engineers, scientists, poets, and military men were taken from their apartments. The ruthless steamroller of the Great Terror ground up lives, leaving behind orphans and widows poisoned by one terrible phrase: enemies of the people. For 13-year-old Natalia Bekhtereva, a loved, homeschooled girl from an intellectual Leningrad family, this hell became a personal reality. First, they took her father, the talented engineer Pyotr Bekhterev, and soon her mother, the doctor Zinaida Bekhtereva. In one instant, her world, full of books, music, and parental love, collapsed. She, along with her brother and sister, was thrown out of life like unnecessary garbage. Now they bore the brand, children of enemies of the people. It was a sentence. In that coordinate system, it meant your path was predetermined. After school, at best, to a brick factory, at worst, to the camps. No institutes, no science, no future. You are refuse, the descendant of traitors, and the system will do everything so that you never raise your head. Even then, being a teenager, Natalia Bekhtereva understood with cold clarity. To survive, she needed to become not just a good student. She needed to become the best, brilliant, undeniably a genius. Only in this way could she break through this wall. Only in this way could she prove her right to life. Her new home became an orphanage for the children of the repressed, a place filled with the same grief, fear, and despair. It seemed this was the end. But it was here, at the very bottom, that fate gifted her a meeting that defined her entire future life. The 3 laws of survival. The director of this sorrowful institution was a man named Arkady Isayevich Kellner. Stately, intellectual, with a beautiful wife, he looked nothing like a jailer or a bureaucratic official. This was a teacher with a capital T, a man of indestructible will and amazing wisdom. The children loved him to tears and feared him to trembling at the same time. But it was not fear of cruelty, it was fear of not justifying his hopes, fear of his high standards, which, as Bekhtereva understood, were dictated by only one thing: desperate love for these unwanted, destitute children. Adaptation to the new life was agonizing. Natasha, a home girl unaccustomed to cruelty, immediately became a target for bullying. She was beaten, her food was taken away. She was a stranger in this wolf pack. But Arkady Kellner saw in her something more than just a victim. He understood that in this cruel world, pity and sympathy would not help. For his students to survive after graduation, they had to become harder than steel. He did not just give them shelter and food. He forged their characters, tempered their souls. He taught them to fight. He did not allow them to wear the brand of orphanage kids. Instead, he perfectly mastered the secret of cultivating resilience and firmness. It was he who, in this hell of despair, gave Natalia Bekhtereva and the other children a priceless gift. 3 iron laws of survival that helped to go through any difficulties without breaking, remaining only stronger. Arkady Kellner did not give lectures and did not write manuals. His lessons were imprinted into consciousness through pain, shame, and delight. He handed his students not just advice, but a secret survival code consisting of 3 unbreakable laws. These laws allowed Natalia Bekhtereva and dozens of other children not just to survive difficulties, but to emerge from them as winners, preserving something more important than life: human dignity. Law 1. Reasonable pride. Natalia Petrovna remembered this lesson for her whole life, and it began with a simple orange dress. One day, the orphanage girls were issued identical bright orange dresses. They were intended for working in the workshops, but the girls, delighted with the new clothes, decided to wear them to school, including Natasha. When Arkady Kellner saw his charges walking down the street in this uniform, he flew into an indescribable rage. Bekhtereva, whom he considered the best student, got it the worst. What was their fault? The director scolded them with icy anger, not for violating discipline, but for something much more terrible. "Why didn't you have the brains to understand?" he thundered. "Out of your own stupidity, you voluntarily put on identical dresses and started looking like orphans from a shelter, who evoke only one emotion in decent people: pity." Kellner explained that he was doing everything possible to rip that orphanage label off them. The boys in the workshops made incredibly beautiful patent leather shoes for them, which, as Bekhtereva said, even the children with families stared at. Each girl had her own unique outfit, and in one fell swoop they crossed out all his efforts, hanging a sign on themselves: "We are unhappy orphans. Pity us." Reasonable pride, according to Kellner, is not arrogance. It is a form of displaying dignity. It is a refusal to look like a victim. It is always a neat and tidy appearance, a straight back, and a clear gaze. It is the understanding that as soon as you allow others to pity you, you have lost. Law 2. Cultivating resilience. This law was taught every day without weekends or holidays. The road from the orphanage to school, especially in the snowy blockade winter, was the first training ground. Overcoming this path in any weather, in hunger and cold, was a daily lesson in endurance. But there were other, far more cruel practical exercises. Bekhtereva recalled that being a home child she became an object of severe bullying. Once, after another beating, Kellner called her into his office and demanded she name the instigators, promising to punish them. Natasha refused. For this, she sat the rest of the day without lunch and dinner on the leather sofa in his office. And the next morning at the assembly, the director described her forced and fruitless starvation in vivid colors, presenting her act as an example of unbending will. Soon after this, the children themselves began to conduct shocking experiments on resilience. They tested who could endure pain the longest. "And I still keep a memory of this," wrote Bekhtereva. "A round spot on the back of my left hand is visible to this day. I out-endured everyone." This scar became an eternal reminder. Resilience is not a pretty word, but a muscle that needs to be trained through pain and overcoming. It is the ability to withstand what seems unbearable and discover that your breaking point is much further away than you thought. Law 3. Emotional balance. Kellner understood that resilience and pride alone are not enough to survive. A hardened steel blade can break if it is not tempered. A soul living in constant tension needed a vent, a source of light in the hopeless darkness, and he brilliantly created this source. After exhausting lessons and heavy duties, life in the orphanage turned into an extravaganza. The theatre became the main cure for anguish. Full-scale plays were staged, with everything: words, dances, music, and songs. The most important rule: actors and spectators constantly swapped places. Every child inevitably went up on stage, receiving their portion of applause and positive emotions. And in the evenings, when there were no rehearsals, all life was given to sports. Skates in winter, swimming and rowing in summer. Through these simple and wonderful methods, the director strengthened the children's peace of mind. He understood that negative emotions cannot be suppressed. They can only be displaced by positive ones. Arkady Kellner, who perished in the first days of the war, left his children not money and not property. He left them something incomparably more valuable: a perfect system of psychological defense which allowed them to go through any hell, not only losing nothing but acquiring the most important thing, an unbending inner core. Conclusion: the keys to reality. And now, having passed through the frozen hell of the orphanage and the labyrinths of human consciousness, we return to that very shocking idea with which everything began, to the mysterious, powerful creature locked inside our skull, to our brain. Natalia Bekhtereva spent her whole life trying to understand its language, to unravel its motives. And it was in the 3 simple laws bequeathed by the orphanage director that she found what she was looking for: a universal key not just to survival, but to managing this incredible power. Arkady Kellner's 3 laws turned out to be not just wise advice. They were a genuine instruction manual for tuning that very creature inside us. An instruction for turning it from a capricious and dangerous tyrant into a powerful ally. Think for yourself. Reasonable pride is nothing other than a command given to our brain. Never accept the victim program. By refusing self-pity, refusing the uniform of an orphanage orphan, a person forces their brain to look not for paths of retreat and weakness, but for paths of strength, dignity, and victory. Cultivating resilience is a process of tempering neural networks. Every time we endure pain, overcome fear, and do not give up, we literally rewire our brain, making it immune to the blows of fate. The scar on Bekhtereva's hand was not just a mark. It was a symbol that her brain had learned to perceive pain not as a signal of surrender, but as an ordinary irritant that can and must be endured. Finally, emotional balance is direct management of the brain's biochemistry. By creating artificial sources of joy through theatre and sports, Kellner taught children to consciously trigger the production of endorphins to withstand the destructive action of stress hormones. In the light of this knowledge, both the paradox of Ivan the Fool and the theory of toxic kindness become crystal clear. The ability to be Ivan is a conscious command to the brain to switch to energy-saving mode, given within the framework of the law on emotional balance. And protection from the exploiters of kindness is a direct consequence of the law on reasonable pride. After all, a person possessing a sense of self-dignity will instinctively not allow their brain to execute a self-destruction program for the sake of others. It turns out Natalia Bekhtereva did not just study the brain as an object. Her whole life became the greatest experiment, proving he who has mastered these three laws gains access to the control panel of his reality. We cannot change the world around us, but we can tune our internal receiver so that it works for our victory. The legacy of Natalia Petrovna Bekhtereva is not only hundreds of scientific works and revolutionary discoveries. It is priceless knowledge, paid for by inhuman suffering and confirmed by a brilliant life. Knowledge that inside each of us lies a force capable of withstanding any chaos. And to control this force, complex technologies or mystical rituals are not needed. Only 3 keys are needed, forged in the fire of one of the most terrible tragedies of the 20th century. Do not allow yourself to be pitied. Be hard as steel. And always, even in the deepest darkness, know how to light your own light. In this lies the main secret of managing fate. Wisdom passed through fire is priceless. If the life lessons of the great academician Natalia Petrovna Bekhtereva resonated in your soul, support our channel. Like this video so that as many people as possible can touch this knowledge. Subscribe to the channel Wisdom of Natalia Bekhtereva to continue this path to self-discovery and the great secrets of our consciousness together. And be sure to click the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Thanks for watching. Manage your reality.